Hello, 7th graders, and welcome to Lesson 3.4 on multiplying rational numbers. Now, think back to Chapter 2 when we were multiplying integers, and there are some key rules that come into play here. So check out this chart. This chart highlights what we talked about in Chapter 2, that a positive times a positive is a positive times a negative is a negative times a positive is also a negative, and a negative times a negative, well, that cancels each other out and it's a positive. So if you haven't written that in your notes somewhere, write that in your notes. Otherwise, there's this chart here that lets you know if the sign of the factors are positive and negative, the sign of the product is going to be negative. This only leaves out that a negative times a negative is a positive, and a positive times a positive is a positive, which we already knew. All right, example 1. Gina hiked down a canyon and stopped each time she descended half a mile to rest. She hiked a total of 4 sections. What is her overall change in elevation? Well, she descends half a mile 4 times. So we're going to multiply 4 times negative 1/2 because she's descending. We're going to represent it with a negative. She's going down. All right, so remember multiplication is also repeated addition. Negative 1/2 4 times is going to be like negative 1/2 plus negative 1/2 plus negative 1/2 plus negative 1/2 4 times. So we can also represent multiplication on a number line just like we represent addition on a number line. We're going to start at 0 and then make 4 increments of negative 1/2 each. So each one is negative 1/2. We add all those together and we end at negative 2. I can also find the product of the positive numbers and then change it to a negative. So I know half of 4 is 2. I know a positive times a negative is a negative. So 4 times negative 1/2 is going to be negative 2. All right, let's check out this number 1. You try it on your own and then play the video back to see if you got it right. I'm going to go ahead and solve it. 2 times 3.5, I could either find the positive product and then make sure it's negative because this is a positive times a negative, so I know my answer is going to be negative. Or the book suggests representing it with a number line, so let's try that. 2 times negative 3.5 is going to be 2 groups of negative 3.5 each. So start at 0, our first group goes to negative 3.5, and then our second group is going to end at negative 7. I also know 2 times 3.5 is 7. Make sure it's negative. Answer is negative 7. All right, so this page focuses on multiplying rational numbers with the same sign. Remember, a positive times a positive is a positive, and a negative times a negative is also a positive. All right, so let's look at this example. If you notice, this is actually the same numbers that we did on the last page. We did 2 times negative 3.5, and our answer was negative 7. Well, now we're going to do negative 2 times negative 3.5. I know a negative times a negative is a positive. It's going to be the same number, but the opposite. So our answer is going to be positive 7. We can also think of this as the opposite of 2 times negative 3.5. This sign in front, I like to just say the opposite there. So if I find 2 groups of negative 3.5, which is negative 7, and then I find the opposite of that, my answer is going to be 7. So on this second example where it says your turn, if you just find 3 times negative 1.25 and then make it the opposite of that, that'll be your answer. So why don't you pause the video, try that by yourself. You can use the number line or just do it in your head. Or write it down, like I like to do 1.25 times 3, like that. Multiply it whichever way you want. Play the video back to see if you got it right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and solve it. You could, if you're using the number line, you're going to go 3 groups of negative 1.25. So start at 0, first group's going to be about there, and then count 2.25 and then 1, second group's going to be at negative 2.5. And then count half, count another 1. Third group is going to be at negative 3.75. And then make sure that's a positive, so your final answer is 3.75. If you multiply it out like I did on the right here, 3 times 5 is 15, mark the 5, carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 3 times 1 is 3. Make sure the decimal has 2 digits after it. Answer is 3.75. All right, when we have more than 2 rational numbers, all of a sudden that little chart gets a little complicated to follow. The way that I like to keep track of it is 2 negatives cancel out. So if I have, like in this example, a negative times a negative times a negative, the first 2 negatives cancel out, so I can rewrite this as 2/3 times 1/2 and make both of those positive because those 2 negatives canceled out, times -3/5. Now there's only 1 negative left multiplying, so I know my product is going to be negative. All right, so then we multiply it out just like we multiply fractions. When we multiply fractions, we multiply straight across and then simplify the last step. So 2 times 1 times 3 is 6, and 3 times 2 times 5. 3 times 2 is 6, times 5 is 30, so I'm going to have 6 over 30. Make sure that's negative, and then we're going to simplify. 6 actually is a factor of 30. 6 goes into 35 times. So my answer is going to be 1/5. That was an equal sign there. -1/5. All right. So let's reflect on this. Look for a pattern. You know the product of 2 negative numbers is positive. The product of 3 negative numbers is negative. So if I have 4 negative numbers multiplying, what do you think the product's going to be? Well, 2 and 2 would cancel out, so the product of 4 negative numbers would be positive. The product of 5 negative numbers would be negative. So it looks like it's going every other. This sentence says, write a rule for finding the sign of the product of n negative numbers. Well, if there's a odd number of negative numbers, if n is odd, then it's going to be negative. If there's an even number of negative numbers, they're going to cancel out, and then it will be positive. All right, pause the video, try these 3 problems at the bottom on your own, play it back to see if you got it right. All right, I'm going to go ahead and solve. Number 4, there are 3 negatives, so I know my answer is going to be negative. When we multiply straight across. 3 times 4 is 12, times 2 is 24. And 4 times 7 is 28, times 3 is 84. And now I can simplify this. I'm going to start by simplifying it by 2, because I know both even numbers are always divisible by 2. Now I have 12 over 42. Still both even. I can still divide both by 2. And so now I have 6 over 21. Now they can both be simplified by 3, so I have 2 over 7. Make sure that negative carries all the way, and our final answer is going to be -2/7. All right, this next one, instead of multiplying them out and then simplifying, because we had to simplify 4 steps there, I'm going to practice simplifying before multiplying. So here I see a 3 on top and bottom. Those are going to cancel out. Then I see a 4 on top and bottom. Those are going to cancel out. What I mean by cancel out is they're going to be 1, so they're not going to appear in the final equation. 3 divided by 3 is 1, 4 divided by 4 is 1. So that means my final answer is just going to be 2 over 5, and I see 2 negatives. Those negatives are going to cancel out, so our final answer is 2/5. You could multiply this out and then simplify to make sure you get the same answer. That's going to be our answer. All right, and the last one, solve it however you solved it. The answer is 1/2 or 0.5, and there's 1 negative sign, so our answer is going to be negative, -1/2. All right, your homework today is going to be to do problems 1 through 15 odd. Remember, the odd problems are every other, numbers not divisible by 2, so 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and 15. Good luck. Email me if you have any questions.